That
remember that
I
when you
told
were
you
doing
not
that?
to use that word. I told you that there were certain
Well, there
words
it
that I
is.
did not
Oh,
want.
hey, Reed.
What?
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
This is your friendly neighborhood Fear of God co-host Nathan and Reed doing something a little different. We thought in honor of anniversary month / 6 weeks that you caught us in the middle of reminiscing.
Yeah.
And we're just pondering and reflecting and thinking and musing and wanted to have a little conversation with each other and in a little ways with you guys about this first year of the Fear of God. So Reed.
Hi, it's Nathan.
We're a year in. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Yeah, this is crazy. I wasn't really sure if we would make it, so I'm really happy that we did.
I know. There was that one time where we had this big blow up off mic, and
oh yeah,
I was like, never again, lackey.
That's
and
right.
You were like, screw you, Rouse.
That's exactly right. I think I used more inappropriate language, but yeah, it was true. Like we have one of those, about every 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
I honestly, what's really funny about that? Like I could roll with that. I can't remember the last fight we had. I don't think we've ever full
It's probably
blown.
Unhealthy that we don't fight more.
It's true. We have those because when we disagree, we have those really civil discussions. Like, okay, hear me.
What I hear you saying is this.
I hear you.
And
I see you.
I don't know that that's what you're saying. But it's what I'm hearing, so just clarify for me what you really mean.
We're the most boring arguers in the world because they're all civil.
On pod news or pod stuff. So one, yes, we're having a little year in review, little mini bonus episode, little mini-sode, dropping in your feed. Expressing some appreciation to you guys, reminiscing about the last year.
Yes, lots of appreciation.
So Reed, I had no real podcast. I was not an exhaustive podcast listener or consumer before becoming a podcaster alongside you.
Ah, yeah.
So didn't really know what to compare to. And it is funny. I've got a few little super esoteric nerd hobbies that will not be discussed here. But occasionally, well, actually just recently I tried to listen to a couple of podcasts about this hobby and I was like, these guys suck. They are so dumb.
Wow.
Like the actual people were dumb and they were boring and they were so lifeless. So Reed, I don't know. I feel like I took for granted what we have here for a little while, and so I apologize for that. But I've got a newfound sort of appreciation for how awesome we are, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Wow, and humble too. It's we've really got humility pegged to a T, no question about it. Yeah, it's funny because I think back, it was back in March of 2016, thinking about starting the show, thinking about what it might look like, iteration, formatting. I was unwisely going to do it solo and was terrified of doing that. And then I was talking about it with you just to get advice. And your best piece of advice for me was, well, why don't you have me on the show with you? The show could just be the broadcast version of our 15 going on 20 years of friendship. It's and here we are. So
I mean, I think the basic premise was, if you just put a microphone in my face, I'm kind of good to go. And I just wanted to. That's really what it was. I mean, it was totally altruistic. It was for you. It was for you.
Sure. No.
So something this is a loose kind of framework here. We're not following our typical sort of format and formula, intentionally so, but we wanted to, traipse a bit down memory lane over the last year and cover a few topics, some frivolous, some substantive. We wanted to talk about a few different things on this little mini-sode in terms of looking back and reflecting. I want to start, Reed, with a question. You and I discussed a little bit of this off, but neither of us really know the answers each other has. One of the topics, or one of the little bullet points we wanted to address, was over the course of the last 53-ish weeks. A preliminary question. Were there any movies that you glanced through that you had not seen already? I can't remember.
The ones that were released post launch of the show.
Okay.
So there were, I think 4 or 5 that we've done that were released in the time frame after we started the show or were planning the show. And then they were released that way. I think, yeah.
Okay, maybe like The Conjuring 2.
Yeah, Conjuring 2. Yeah, The Invitation actually dropped on Netflix after
and Split.
Green Room, I think. I would need to go back and see exactly when Green Room was released, but it was around the time that we were sort of starting up.
Cool. Well, in the spirit of that, I want to know if you were looking through the catalog of things we've discussed. And this doesn't have to be just a single answer, but limited a little bit for the sake of our time today.
Sure.
What would you say was either a favorite new or rediscovered film from what we have talked about this year?
Can I answer one for each? Will that be acceptable?
Or you can answer. I've got 2 for each, so you can have fun.
All right. Well, we'll tennis match this. I will start with my favorite new one, and that is hands down The Invitation. My favorite of the new films that we saw. New films, meaning new to me, because I had seen every other film that we've covered beforehand. But starting the pod, the films that were released since we launched the podcast, The Invitation is my favorite. And it still stays with me. I love it. I adore that film.
I will reference that one elsewhere, but I was remiss. I would echo that, but I didn't have it exclusively on mine, so I will let you have exclusivity to that one on this category. This will come as no surprise. One favorite new film of what we discussed was The Visitation, as you know. Yahtzee!
Oh my gosh!
Yep.
Yes. So yeah, The Visit was clearly by our
Oh, The Visit.
Yeah.
What am I saying?
Well,
Visitation.
You're talking about
I
the Frank.
just blended them.
That's okay. You're talking about the Frank Peretti novel. The
Wow.
The Visitation.
No, I really wasn't that. I wasn't doing that.
But no,
it's a whole different. The Visit. Yes.
Yeah.
Shyamalan's The Visit. That's what I'm going for.
Clearly a favorite according to our David S. Pumpkins meter, which is, still sits at a 9 out of 10. That's how it's going. So yeah, there was that, and you clearly loved The Visit, but I loved it too, so I don't mind that. Another in the Shyamalan camp, another favorite new one for me is of course Split. So that's a really big deal to me. I really enjoyed it. I was glad that it, The Visit kind of kicked the door down a little bit or cracked it open for Shyamalan's resurgence, and then Split solidified it. So yeah, I was happy about all that.
Awesome. I think my second on the favorite new category would be Bone Tomahawk. I was unfamiliar with it. Well, I take that back. I mean, if you listen to the pod, I do reference this. I was aware of its existence. Peers had talked about it, but they'll never listen to this. It was peers whose opinion I wouldn't necessarily just be like, oh yeah, you like that. Cool. I'm going to watch it. But, enough stuff started validating its existence. And I was like, okay, I'll check this out. And then your unabashed passion for it proved validated by the actual film itself. So I definitely loved that one and would put it in the favorite new category.
I loved that. Yeah, I still love that film so much. A favorite, I'm going to start with my second place favorite rediscovery would be reconnecting with Zodiac. I thought watching Zodiac again, I already knew it was a phenomenal film, but watching it again, I was like, it's darn near perfect. It's great. I loved getting to rewatch that and having an excuse to get to talk about it.
Do you have any more on the rediscovery? I've got 2, but I can bullet them real quick.
Yeah. My number 1 for rediscovery, if you want me to tell it now.
Sure.
My number 1 for rediscovery is The Village. I won't say too much about it now because The Village is going to come up a little later, but getting to watch that again and being able to wrap my mind around what I really responded to and what I didn't quite respond to was phenomenal for me. So yeah, The Village.
That makes me happy. 1, because that is on my list of rediscovered movies. And 2, just because I do recall you being a little not hesitant to cover it, but just I remember my affection is so strong for it. I wasn't sure if that would be synonymous for you. So yeah, The Village would be on that list for me. Secondarily, not really by any degrees. They're kind of right on par with each other. honestly would be Take Shelter. I know it's pretty recent, but
yeah.
I was happy to realize that my affection in the rear view was merited by the film itself, and so happy to give that one another go and really find it to be as lovely and as just sort of heartbreaking and warming all at the same time as I remembered. Let's do. I want to do. We'll kind of pop in with various stuff here. One thing we did do that was kind of fun was solicit some thoughts from listeners on the Facebook page about what ways and what sort of conversations we've had that have really been impactful or resonant or meaningful, anything like that. And we'll drop one of those in right here.
Sure.
Specifically, Tony Vance. Shout out to you, buddy. Thank you for being a listener. Thank you for, interacting as much as you do. He gave props to the Raven episode, which was pretty fun because that was such a, I hesitate to call it a curveball, but it was, it's pretty different sort of formatting and that sort of thing. And with stuff like this, you're never quite sure how that's going to land.
Exactly.
So it was really nice to, see the kind of response it did. And we did at the time, there's another listener at the time of that episode's release who didn't repost for the new stuff, but active listener, he didn't give me permission, or I didn't seek permission to say his name, so I won't, but reached out to both of us about just how impactful the conversation surrounding the Raven was. So I don't know. I think it's pretty cool that episode had the resonance that it did for people.
It was also brief shout out. I don't know if they'll ever listen either, but it was also hands down my mom and dad's favorite episode.
Really?
Which surprisingly enough, they
was it the only one they've actually listened to?
No, they've listened to. They are not avid listeners, but they've listened to about a dozen different episodes of the show now, and they really responded most strongly to the Raven. So yeah, it was nice. It was nice to get that little bit of validation. It was cool.
Awesome. So we'll come back in a couple minutes and throw in another audience response kind of conversation bit. So talked about favorite new films, favorite rediscoveries. Let's do, if it's cool with you, sort of in line with the previous, sort of discoveries, new stuff. Biggest surprise movie for you? Like what were you just not expecting much of, or really didn't know what to expect and really were taken by? I've got a couple runners up, but it all leads to kind of one that probably won't surprise you once you hear it. I would say The Invitation might fit the bill here. It'd probably be a close runner up, but sure. I sort of anticipated that I might like it. So in that respect, it wasn't a huge surprise. Right. Where this will make sense with where I'm going. So what tops my, if you were to write out all the movies we've watched in the last year and say which of these most surprised you with how it affected or impacted or steered conversation, honestly, it would be Unfriended. I just had,
oh wow, I
had zero, like my expectations were low. Like as you will recall, I was like, I don't know about Unfriended.
You heavily balked at Unfriended at first. First,
that was one of those arguments we were talking about, right? We almost unfriended each other over Unfriended. But no, that one was truly a surprise for me. I mean, I don't think it's high art per se, but it is a strongly executed, little bit of a novelty, but really. If listeners have been around for that amount of time, that was almost solidly a year ago now.
Yeah, it was pretty early.
Led to some pretty robust conversation just about social media and faithfulness in regard to social media and the digital life and all that sort of stuff. So that would probably be a very easy answer for me in terms of biggest surprise.
Awesome. I think the one for me, and it's not necessarily related to the discussion we had about it, but it was the one that I was, because like I said, I'd seen most of these films beforehand. The one that I was just kind of like, yeah, we'll get to that and maybe we'll have a good conversation about it, but then wound up really affecting me this time around was The Mummy, the Universal Monsters Mummy. Just wasn't. I had always bucketed that as a lower tier film for myself and didn't really enjoy it. But then watching it, perhaps through the lens of the kind of conversations that we have, I was very affected by it and was happy to be so. So yeah, my biggest surprise of the ones we've done so far has been The Mummy.
Awesome. So moving right along, while this is an anniversary look back, we don't want to spend too much time looking back because, brother, we got a lot of looking forward to do.
Yeah.
So I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't discuss, at least in brief, some of our favorite idiotic slapstick asinine gags from the year. I actually have a list of 7. For the sake of time, I'll just do 4. So
that's pretty awesome.
I gotta tell you, man, like, I love, listeners will know this, you will know this will come as no surprise. I love coming up with idiotic,
you do
ridiculous ways to introduce you to the episode. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Like when I'm watching a movie and someone says something ridiculous, I'll be like, oh, that's it. That's how Reed's joining the show.
Oh my gosh.
One other of my 4, and then I'll bounce to you if you've got some.
Sure.
I told my wife the other day, I was unrelated to this, the knowledge of us recording this. I still adore how live on air I punked you with the Glass tagline, the new Shyamalan.
Oh
movie.
my gosh, you were ridiculous.
Fantastic. I was so
It was great.
It
was great. You should be proud because that was one of the few, like, genuinely, I was like, oh, what's the tagline for this? I'm like, you.
Well, what's funny is in hindsight, I wish I had doubled down because, if you listen to the recording, I give away real quickly, like, this is not legit, and then offer a second stupid one. I wish, like, I think about this because I sometimes will go back and listen to these conversations. I'm like, man, if I had just fainted that first one and been like, no, really, this is I was just kidding, Reed. This is the real one. And then done it again. Oh, it would have been glorious. So, missed opportunity.
Sure. Of course.
What about you?
Well, I'm going to mention too, I don't know that I would really call it a gag, but,
sure.
But one of my, okay, so my second place favorite gag or whatever
Bit.
we want to element.
Sure.
Is Mr. David S. Pumpkins.
Oh, wow, that was brilliance.
So I was really happy that you finally, because we were laboring over that for a while. We were like, we need a rating system. We want it to be specific to us, something kind of fun, something kind of special. And you, I think, either just said it outright that it should be in David S. Pumpkins or sent me one of his gifts. I can't quite remember how you introduced it, but it was very much like, you were like, we should be in David S. Pumpkins. I was like, yes. It was like
that was
a light bulb hit the phone, and it was,
yes.
Hallelujah. I was like, yep, that's the one. That's the one.
That was a providential moment. That's how you know God loves our podcast.
but my number one, this is going to surprise you because we have not called it out in quite some time. But one of my favorite, only because I think it's such an appropriate metaphor for what sometimes happens on this show, is back in our John Carpenter profile. One of the, like going back a year ago to our, John Carpenter profile for the month of October, we had a lot of little things crop up out of that. I don't have that amount of money. I don't have that much money, which was fun. But my favorite gag that we need to come back and use more frequently than we do is chuck those grenades in that backpack. Chuck those grenades. Because it was a reference to They Live when Roddy Piper and Keith David are tossing grenades in a backpack like they're candy bars in a lunch sack. I mean, they're just like... and so then we'll drop a conversation bomb, and like imminently right after the Carpenter profile, we would occasionally call out like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna chuck this grenade in a backpack and see what blows up. And I feel like that still happens. Well,
it's like a metaphor for just doing anything haphazardly,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah, exactly.
Geez, man, you're just like tossing a grenade in a backpack. Like, what are you talking about? Clearly, you haven't seen They Live, only the finest cinema in modern history.
5.5 minute fight scene. So yeah,
if you remember, you gave me crap about that because I was talking about the contact lens. Remember? Like, I was saying like, good grief, there's no chance that they're that have that level of aptitude to be able to function contact lenses that astutely so quickly. And you're like, come on, man. And then they're throwing grenades in backpacks.
My gosh.
My only other two, If I ever need a pick me up, I listen to the first 30 minutes of The Fly. And then the last.
There's a bag lady for me to barf on.
Oh my gosh. And then the last 30 minutes where about the transformation, it just
yeah.
you know, makes my heart all aflutter, if we're going to
Sure.
do that. My last
quivering.
sort of, yes, with cleanness. My last in terms of best gags, just because I don't know how to replicate. You can't recreate these things, but Jimmy the It Follows monster is that is like classic Fear of God right there, people.
That I had almost forgotten about Jimmy the It Follows monster. That is, and I remember now that you say that, I remember how much joy I had the fact that you could not even finish your thought because you were like, anyway, what do you find scary, Reed?
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just.
Oh my gosh! Oh, that's so funny.
That was rough.
I love it.
That was rough. I tried to get through, but it just did not work.
Oh my gosh, that was really. Oh, that was great. Yeah, I shout out to Jimmy the It Follows monster. Well, we have one more little shout out to give for this specific episode. First of all, before I give this one, lots and lots of our listeners have been. We sent out a specific call out for this episode in particular, but lots of listeners have engaged with us over time, and we appreciate each and every one of you. We try to individually respond to each and every one of you, and we're very, very thankful you're here, thankful you're listening. But one of I call him our favorite heckler. He's been a heckler on Twitter for us for quite some time. He is actually a fellow horror aficionado, a fellow faithful follower of a faithful believer in Jesus Christ, and so our good friend Blake, one of the hosts of the Body the Blood podcast, has reached out to us many times about how the show has affected him and how much he enjoys it, and so he specifically referenced our most recent episode as of this recording, Take Shelter, and said that just the Take Shelter just had some personal resonance for him that he was really appreciative of that conversation. But I just really appreciate Blake. Blake has been a very big fan of the show from the very beginning, very affirming. He calls us out when we get it wrong, and he congratulates us when we get it right. And Blake's just a good guy, and we appreciate you very much, Blake. We give you occasional crap, but we adore you, and thanks so much for being here. So we should probably find a way to round this out. What do you think's a good topic to sort of round all this out with?
Well, let it not be said that my sole contribution to the history of the Fear of God is Jimmy the It Follows monster. So I do think there would be some value in just maybe highlighting for you, Reed, personally, and I'll share a few too of. As you've scanned back through the catalog and reminisced about certain conversations and certain discussions, what really has stayed with you, has bubbled to the surface, what was impactful in the moment and consistently your mind or spirit come back to. So yeah, I just thought it would be a nice adieu to the first year of the Fear of God to highlight some of those really impactful, meaningful conversations.
Sure. I, being the fan of lists that I am, Nathan Rouse, and I will not be rattling all of these off, but I ranked every single conversation that we've had.
Oh my gosh!
So I know definitively what my feelings are on each of these. I'm only going to mention 3 of them and only one of them in any sort of depth. So I don't know how many you wanted to reference. 1, 2. I don't know how many you've got, but
I'll 2 kind of just nods to, and then 3 with a mild bit of lip service, but nothing super. I'm not gonna rattle on for 10 minutes on each of these.
Yeah, me either. So I'll give my little lip service first, and then I'll let you do that.
Yep.
So I hope I'm not stealing one for you, but I think. When the Fear of God first sort of started to realize what it was going to be was with our conversation about 10 Cloverfield Lane. And that's one that, listeners, it was a while ago. So if you haven't heard that one, go back and check it out. We're still early in the process, so sound quality is a little different and everything, but that was a good one. And I still think frequently, Nathan, about your observation about the idolatry of safety. And I appreciate that episode very much for what it meant to the show and for how it played out.
Sure. No, I was actually mentally adding that to the list and then figured that's where you're heading. Like, oh, all good. That was one of my honorable mentions. And I'm with you. That was, I felt like that was when, though all the conversations preceding were solid and positive, things felt like they really kind of coalesced in a real strong way. Honestly, it is, I'm giving it lip service only because it's so recent, but I think the Take Shelter is a super strong.
Yeah.
I mean, it's powerful.
It's number 5 for me in my list.
Wow.
Out of all of the recent, so I know it's recent, but it's up there. It was something kind of special for both of us. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, and you did a bang up job with that outro music. I shared this, texted you. I got teary just hearing the episode in and going to that song. Yeah. It was really, really resonant and powerful. I will do, so I've got 3. I'll do 1, and then how many do you have?
I only have 2 more that I was going to mention. Yeah.
Okay, well, that works. So one of mine that might be, none of these are in any particular order, but just as I mulled what came to me, honestly, Witches. I felt like that's a really great, robust kind of conversation about parenting, and it kind of hit a vein in terms of if you're a 30-something parent of children. If you haven't read that material, Scott Snyder's graphic novel material, it's awesome, and excellent work,
yeah.
and scary, yeah. But he really incorporates a lot of that sort of parental anxiety type stuff into that, and so that one has stayed with me a lot.
Yeah, I really like that one too. Do you want to know my rankings for all these, or do you care?
I mean, of course we care.
That one ranked 29 for me, which sounds a bit low, but
wow.
But I did love that one. I mean, we're talking, these are by inches of degrees until you get down into like the 40s. But
sure.
It's I really appreciated that episode. My number two favorite conversation that we had, just because it was kind of spontaneous where it went and how sort of impassioned both you and I got about its subject matter, was actually our conversation about Let Me In, which might be surprising. It was the launch of the Universal Monsters series, a companion film to Dracula, and my mind frequently returns to that in terms of just being able to have a free-flowing conversation that felt very pertinent and important to both of us, and so yeah, my mind goes back to Let Me In frequently.
That one actually almost made this rundown for me.
Yeah.
Moving along for myself, second on my list, honestly, was The Village. I think Lucius's "I don't worry about what will happen, only what needs to be done" is a reasonable choice for a tattoo. I'm only half joking. I mean, that's just such a powerful statement of
sure.
faith, really.
Yeah, sure.
So that one's pretty impactful. What about you?
Well, my friend, The Village.
Where did The Village fall?
It's number 1.
Oh, really?
The Village
awesome.
The Village is my favorite.
I did not plan that. Okay.
The Village is my favorite episode that we've ever done. I say this without any intent on hyperbole. I feel like The Village, for me, is the heart and soul of our show. I feel like it is that kind of conversation, our subject matter. I walked away from that episode when we recorded it, and when I listened back to it, I walked away from that episode saying, this is why we do this show, is to have the conversations like this. Not just because of the film it was, but just this intersection of faith versus fear. Some of the places where our conversation went during that episode, for me, The Village thus far is the heart and soul of the show. So if listeners haven't heard it yet, because you're like, it's The Village, please go back and listen to it, because I'm very, very proud of that episode. But more so than that, it's just become a very sort of important landmark in our show and why we do it.
Maybe you and I have bandied this idea around for a while. Maybe that's our first foray into commentary track.
Oh, that would be nice. That would be really nice.
That would be fun. My last one on the list, honestly, and I would be curious. My guess is this one probably falls in the top 10 at least. Was Bone Tomahawk.
It just barely missed the top 10. Barely. Yeah.
Oh,
just
really?
Barely.
Wow.
Yeah, it landed at number 12. But my top 10 is pretty strong. I mean, Invitation's up there, The Fly's up there, Alien, Green Room. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah. So it just barely fell out of the top 10. I loved our conversation about Bone Tomahawk.
Well, and I think it's funny because I think the themes of both Bone Tomahawk and Let Me In, which you already referenced, are similar in this. You know, there's theoretical ways in which we try to suss out and talk through what it means to be a faithful follower of Jesus in the world in which we live. And then there are very practical ways. There are very tangible, practical ways that we try to figure out what it means to be the same thing. And something like a Bone Tomahawk, though elevated, something like a Let Me In, though elevated, is asking the question, what does it mean to be a faithful human being in the face of what is not?
Right, yeah.
and what is terrible and terrifying?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, how do you maintain faith in yourself, faith in a community, faith in the Lord, really?
Absolutely.
Well, awesome, man. This has been a fun conversation. You know, I hope you've enjoyed the walk down memory lane. I know I have. Hopefully the people have as well. And that's really all I got, man.
So I just want to say as another blanket statement, if we haven't emphasized it enough already, listeners, we appreciate you so much. We've been a bit overwhelmed with the response to the show, and we're very grateful for you. We're thankful for you. We hope and we hope that you enjoy what we do, and we hope that you will continue to do so, and we very much enjoy it. But most of all, we're very, very thankful that you listen and that you get something out of it. And so we appreciate you very, very much. And just thanks for everything. It means a lot.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you in year 2.
Absolutely. Bye, guys.